All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to be literary detectives. Our case, one of the most famous poems of the 20th century. Because it turns out, there might be a ghost story hiding inside it, one that's been in plain sight for 100 years.
But first, let's start with a really big question. Think about it. We build these huge, grand memorials for wars and soldiers, right? But what about pandemics? They often kill way more people, but they just seem to fade from our memory. Why is that? This question, seriously, is the key to this whole thing.
Okay, let's get into the evidence. Exhibit A, if you will, the ghost of a truly massive, forgotten catastrophe, the 1918 Spanish flu.
I mean, the scale of this thing was just staggering. We're talking more than 50 million people dead, all around the world. To put that into perspective, that number completely dwarfs the casualties from World War I, which was happening at the exact same time. And yet, which one do we have countless movies and books about?
So, why this cultural amnesia? Well, this gets right to the heart of it. A war, that's a story we know how to tell. It's about collective sacrifice, national heroes, public memorials. It's a worthy death. But a pandemic? That's a totally different story. It's a private tragedy, an individual battle you fight alone. There's this feeling of helplessness, and the deaths are often hidden away, almost in disgrace. How do you build a monument to that?
Okay, so with that in mind, let's bring in our main piece of evidence. T.S. Eliot's absolute masterpiece, The Wasteland.
For about 100 years, this is the story we've been told about this poem. It's the big statement on the trauma of World War I. It's about Europe's culture falling apart, Eliot's own personal struggles, this deep spiritual emptiness. And look, those readings are absolutely valid. They're powerful. But is that the whole story?
And this is where things get really interesting. This is where our new lens comes in. What if there's a huge piece of the puzzle that's been sitting there the whole time? A viral context that changes how we see everything.
Just look at this timeline. It lays it all out. World War I is wrapping up right as the Spanish flu pandemic is absolutely exploding across the globe. And then, the clincher, December 1918. T.S. Eliot and his wife, Vivian, they both get sick with the flu. So for Eliot, this wasn't some distant news story. This was personal. It was an immediate crisis happening to him, in his own home.
And yeah, we basically have the receipts. You can see it right in his own letters. He talks about having a sort of collapse, sleeping for 2 days straight, feeling very weak and exhausted. This is him documenting, in his own words, the physical and mental toll the flu took on him, right as the seeds of this incredible poem were being planted.
So let's do it. Let's put on this new pandemic lens and go back to the poem itself. Let's look at some of its most famous and most puzzling features.
First things first, we need to talk about a really key symptom of a bad case of the flu, delirium. That disturbed state of mind you get with a super high fever, restlessness, confusion, even hallucinations. This idea is absolutely crucial for what comes next.
So, one of the most famous things about The Wasteland is how broken it feels. It's fragmented, it's dreamlike, it just leaps between all these different voices and places and times with no warning. For years, everyone just said, oh, that's just modernist experimentation.
But now, read a passage like this one. Bats with baby faces. I mean, come on. If you look at that through the lens of delirium, it's not just some random artsy image. It is an incredibly accurate description of a fever dream. The whole structure of the poem starts to look less like a literary device and more like the actual experience of a mind ravaged by fever.
Okay, next symptom. Anyone who's had a really high fever knows this one. That burning, unquenchable thirst.
And what do we find all over the poem? This obsession with dryness, rocks, and a desperate, desperate longing for water. Drip, drop, but there is no water. Suddenly, that's not just a fancy metaphor for spiritual emptiness, is it? It's also a gut-punch description of the physical agony of the flu.
And finally, let's talk about the bodies. The poem is just littered with corpses and bones, and the default explanation has always been, oh, that's the war. That's the soldiers in the trenches.
But look closer. Where does Eliot place these bodies? White bodies naked on the low, damp ground. They're not on a battlefield. They're in the city. They're in gardens and bedrooms. This points to a whole different kind of casualty, doesn't it? The civilian deaths from the pandemic, the bodies that were piling up in homes and towns, not just in the trenches.
So, okay, pulling back this layer in Eliot's poem is fascinating, but it also does something else. It forces us to turn the lens back on ourselves, on our own time, and ask a pretty tough question.
The exact same battle between memory and forgetting is happening right now, as we speak. So how are we going to remember our own pandemic? What's the story that's going to be told about the COVID-19 era?
You can already see this huge gap opening up. On one side, you have the official records, the government statements, the neat stories about clapping for heroes. And on the other side, well, you have the messy, documented reality. The private grief, the isolation, the sheer exhaustion, that long-term toll of what Eliot so perfectly called an innervated living death.
And all those fragments of our experience, the isolation, the fear, the Zoom fatigue, they're all being recorded. In our art, in our news, in our social media feeds, it's all there, just like it was in Eliot's poem. The question is, 100 years from now, will anyone know how to read them? Will they see the real story?
And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. In 100 years, when people look back at our time, where are they going to find our story? Will they have to invent a new lens, just like we did, to find the ghost of our pandemic hiding in all the digital noise we're leaving behind? And what will they find? The whole, messy truth? Or just the parts we decided were worth remembering?